Silky Saws, pretty excited to have these in the store now, and today I'm going to give you a really quick run through of three of our favourites and what the main differences are: straight blade, curved blade, folding and fixed. Probably one of the first questions that we get in store is, do I buy a fixed blade or a folding blade? Now, a little bit of that is up to personal preference and depending on what you're going to be doing with it, how you're going to be using it. Obviously, if you're going to be carrying it, it is a little bit easier to carry a folding blade than it is to carry a fixed blade. The folding blades fold up into half their length, just by the nature of having to be able to fold the blade into the handle. The fixed blade's got a really nice ergonomic handle for pulling one-handed. The longer folding blades does give you the option of using two hands, and the fixed blade is primarily for single-handed use. With the folders that we're ranging, it has two positions with the blade. So you've got this position here, which is your normal position. So if I'm unfolding the blade, it opens to there and locks in. It's got a really nice secure locking mechanism, which is really good. Now, we've got a secondary position. You might say, well, what's that for? So once we're cutting down low, it's really hard to get your hands down under the saw, particularly if you're cutting something really low to the ground. So by this position here is actually going to keep your knuckle free of the ground, which means you're not going to get your knuckle all knocked up. Okay, we're going to talk straight versus curved, and a straight blade is ideal for short work directly in front of you. So if you're sawing something that is at this level, the mechanics of your body tend to mean that that's a fairly straight pull. It's not a curved pull, it's a straight pull. I'm going to sit this one down. Now, if you're going above your head, the mechanics of your body means that this is curved. Now, the same thing happens when you're going below. Now, the issue is that when you're trying to cut something that's flat in front of you, it means that it's awkward to do that curve. So primarily, if you're going to be cutting a lot of stuff in this level and straight in front of you, you want a straight blade. And if you're going to be cutting something that's either above or below, you want a curved blade. Now, obviously, if you're going to take this out the bush, you're going to have to choose one or the other. So if you're going with a bigger one and you're going to be cutting up some firewood and you might be cutting above the head and below, then the curved blade on this larger saw is going to be a better option. If you're only going to be working with small timber directly in front of you, then this straight blade is going to be the best one. Hello. Now, within the bushcrafting circles as well, there's the argument that the straight blade is going to give a cleaner cut overall. So that's something worth considering, particularly if you're doing some finer work and you want to be making something. Silky does a whole bunch of different teeth as far as the actual count, fine versus coarse. So that's something worth considering when you're buying. Right, if we're talking about teeth size, as a general rule, the larger the teeth, the more material it's going to move faster. But in dry wood, that's going to be really difficult. So it's going to potentially chatter along the wood a little bit as you try with like an extra large teeth. So the drier the wood, the finer the teeth that you're going to typically go with. So like a carpentry saw is going to have a fairly fine tooth. Luckily for us out in a bush situation, we're not going to be cutting really, really dry timber. It's not going to be particularly seasoned, especially if you're cutting a tree or some debris off a trail to enable you to get through. Now, if you're cutting firewood, on the other hand, you're going to be wanting to look for some drier timber, so you may be going to want a finer tooth saw. Typically, if you're looking at cutting bigger pieces of timber, you need a bigger saw with larger teeth. If you're looking at cutting smaller pieces of timber, you need a smaller saw with smaller teeth. Where'd your buddy go? Go on, scoot. So it's worth remembering that all Silky saws are a pull saw. So if you push on it, it's not going to do any cutting. So it's actually all to do with the pull stroke as you're going through. You want to try and use the full length of the blade as well. You can see I'm nearly through. We're actually up on the Tumut mountain bike trails. This tree came down just the other day in the windstorm that we had run through. This has been cut with a chainsaw, so you can see how aggressively cut it has been. This has been cut with the Silky, so look how fine that cut is. Big difference. Now for us in a camping or a cleaning a small tree off a trail sort of point of view, the cleaning of the cut probably doesn't really matter too much. But if you're wanting to get some other use out of these and use them at home in a pruning sense, then a nice clean cut is really important, because that's going to stop anything from getting back into the tree and ultimately killing it. Another example of why you might choose a smaller saw over a larger one, and this is like particularly the case if you're going to be using it at home and things as an actual pruning saw, and then still taking it out to do a bit of light camping work, is that I've got this little branch in the middle here that I want to knock off, but I've got a lot of other stuff going on here, so the big saw is just going to be a bit harder to get in there. So with the little straight one, I'm actually able to get right in there into the fork and cut that piece nice and cleanly, straight off with minimum effort and still leaving lots of space. I couldn't have done that with the bigger saw. What we're talking about earlier, the motion of having that straight through. So that works really quite well. You can see the way my arm works, and the mechanics means that that's just a dead straight pull. Now if I swap over to this curve, what you see is that the blade is almost, if I go really slowly, can't quite see it, the blade is almost lifting itself off. So it's a bit awkward, and then that's why some people will end up curving around like that, so that you've got more of the blade in touch. You might already own an axe, you know, something like a Grundfos or a Hultafors. They're both amazing tools. They're great at cutting, they're great at splitting. A Silky Saw is a really good addition to your piece of kit. You will move through and cut up something like this far easier and quicker than what you're going to do with an axe. So particularly if you're cutting up smaller timber for a fire, or even if you're cutting up something that's a bit rounder like this to clear off a trail, then it's well and truly worth considering a Silky Saw in your kit, whether it's in your vehicle or whether it's in your backpack. These things are so good, they really are.